morning, good evening, hello. Welcome to the Celtic Down Under weekend review. My name is Anthony Maguire and I'm joined by Paul Massey as we review Celtic 1, Kilmarnock 1. First, start with an apology that we're actually going to be going out delayed this episode. Unfortunately, couldn't do it live this week. So please give the episode a watch, and if you've got any thoughts or comments, please leave them in the field below in the YouTube section, comment section, and give the video a like so that more like-minded Celts can see it. Paul, it's been absolutely sweltering in Perth. We've been on a run of 40-degree days. I was cooking pizzas out in my oven yesterday. I thought you
were going to say the driveway.
Well,
or your car bonnet.
I kind of feel like I was in the nine planes of hell, but that was watching Celtic at 1 o'clock in the morning. Paul, how was your weekend?
Well, yeah, between, as you say, trying to navigate and negotiate 43-degree days and staying up or getting back up as it was this time, I was absolutely knackered. So I went to bed for an hour and a half and set the alarm dutifully, up for 10 to 11 p.m. Trooped off back to bed, disgusted at 1:05. So yeah, aside from that, and yeah, basically generally being a bit overheated. Yeah, good weekend. One more week of work and then got 3 weeks off. So if only Celtic could get their act together, I'd be pretty pleased with life at the moment, but there's always something, isn't there?
It'd be nice. I mean, you can never have every facet of your life going well all at once. So unfortunately, it's a football team that's letting ourselves down at the moment. They've been a beacon, a bastion of light for, a very long time. But we're going, let's face it, we're going through a bit of a sticky patch at the moment. That's one way of putting it. I may as well touch on the lineup before we get into anything else. We persisted with 4-4-2 or 4-4-1-1. So Adam Ida and Kyogo retaining their positions up top. And the welcome return of Greg Taylor at left back at the expense of Alexander Benabe. And trust me, we'll be discussing that at length. Centre-half pairings the same, Liam Stales and Stephen Welsh. Tony Ralston deputising at right back in the absence of AJ or Alistair Johnson, who will be out potentially for another week or so. Maeda on one wing, Palm on the other, McGregor and O'Reilly in the middle, and Big Joe Hart in goals. Paul, before we get into the the nitty-gritty and the disappointing another 2 points dropped, I feel like I've been saying that a lot these last couple of weeks. Team lines, any surprises? Are you surprised that we persisted with that two up top formation, or did you think you'd revert back to form, Brendan, or that? And then, how happy were you to see Greg Taylor back in the team?
Well, I'd actually called prior that we probably wouldn't make that many changes. I was reading or hearing some stats that I think Rodgers, in his first spell, I can't remember the exact number, but he hardly ever played the same 11 more than one or two games running. It's always one or two tinkers. And if I think back to his first spell, particularly the Invincible season, I don't really remember that, because you remember a handful of people that were stalwarts and played every game, but obviously, you tweak one or two positions. And yeah, that's probably in the forward half. And obviously he's had a lot more to deal with this time round in terms of injuries. So we have been chopping and changing a lot more. Based on how it worked and a relatively comfortable performance or at least a decent result and an okay performance against a tough opponent to get through in the cup. I just thought, obviously, Ida's had a reasonably good start. Kyogo got his goal. And we did look a little bit better. Probably certainly Palmer looked better. Obviously, he was involved in both goals. Miera's only obviously still coming back, but his work rate and his defensive work probably keeps him in, especially when you've got pretty much a second string back four, or you have done up until this point. I kind of fancy that Taylor might be the only change. and was prepared to be surprised if there was more than that, because it's not been uncommon for him to change it. But as it turned out, it's pretty much spot on with how we went. Now, if it was me, I'd have played Nawrocki instead of Welsh. But he seems set on that as his first pick pairing. We'll get into this in more detail, but I cannot believe that the centre backs we spent 7 or 8 million on would have done a worse job than the two that started. I just simply can't believe that would be the case on the limited information we've seen on those two players. But our elite level manager, as we keep getting told he is starting to feel like it's some sort of mass delusion. Keeps deciding that's not the better option, and what he's doing is, in answer to your second part of your question, I was absolutely bloody delighted to see Greg Taylor back in the team. And if that sounds one of the strangest things that have come out of my mouth in a while, prepare for more. Because not only was I delighted he was back in the team, it was pretty clear that the team was significantly better for his addition. But I don't think that's a huge surprise to everyone. As I was saying just before we came on air, a pretty damning indictment of where we are as a club at the minute.
Yeah, I mean, Greg Taylor's definitely come in for a bit of criticism on this podcast. I know we've talked about it before, saying that, it's an area that we need to strengthen and sign a better left back. But having seen his understudy in Alexandre Bernabé the last 2-3 weeks, however many games it's been now, yes, to see him back in the starting line, I was like, oh, thank goodness. He just really a bit more of a consistent performance. And we saw that for the 60 minutes he was on the park before he was clearly substituted based on probably sports science and getting minutes into his legs. But sometimes you just feel that surely you've got to read the room and read the situation. And I know it would have been ideal for me to play longer, but you kind of felt the rot set in when he came off the park. The midfield started to get overrun because, as you say, Taylor was inverting a lot, and he was involved in the lead up to the goal. So he was basically a third man in midfield, and I know Mahesh, if he was in the live comments right now, would be hammering that point. And even to a certain extent, Anthony Ralston was sort of tucking in a bit as well. So you kind of almost saw a little bit of a reversion to, dare I say, Ange ball to a certain extent. But in amongst that, there was still passages of play where it was incredibly slow. It was side to side. It was pedestrian. And, Brendan came out in his post-match and did sort of say we're too slow progressing the ball. But I've seen some videos and I've seen some passages of play, and there was one in particular, I think it was Welsh gets caught on the ball, but prior to that, there must have been three or four opportunities.
Scales gets caught on it
to get the ball to get us to it up the park. You could see players showing, Kyogo showing, you could see players out wide showing, but nobody was willing to take that, extra 10% risk or whatever it is just to progress the ball up the park and get us out. And we were just getting trapped in this final third playing these square balls. And I just think that gave Kilmarnock a bit of confidence. And they just thought, well, actually, these guys aren't as good as you say. And a lot of that comes back to, as much as you can coach players, if you haven't got the quality or the ability to play those sorts of passes, or you might have the ability, but if you're not confident under pressure to play those sorts of passes, then why are they getting picked? You're talking about Nawrocki being on the bench, Lagerbielke. Well, clearly Lagerbielke is way on the nose, and I think unless every defender in the team was injured, that'd be probably the only way he would get a game. But Nawrocki has demonstrated one of his main strengths is being able to play a pass through the lines and be able to hit targets at distance and also that 5-10 yard range, but willing to try and push the ball forward quickly. That's what we need at the moment.
And step out. He's happy. He's happy with the ball at his feet. He's confident running forward with the ball. You're absolutely spot on. The problem with both Welsh and Scales, even worse in my view, is too many touches required to get the ball under control, which slows the game down and gets Killie-ing back in their shape. And then a complete inability to pass through the lines or even attempt to pass through the lines, and no ability to step out with the ball and potentially take a player on. Now Scales actually did do that a couple of times, but it was deep in their half, so the risk was less, and the kind of space just kind of a bit opened up for him, so he was able to sort of confidently push it past the player. We don't see either willing to do that when it is in our final third. The amount of times that we went back to Joe Hart and just did the triangles there. On the odd occasion when we did push it into one player above, we're passing it to them hardly, basically facing back towards the defender. So we're giving them the ball when they're not in a position. They're not even in the quarter turn, never mind the half turn. So they haven't got the opportunity to play it forward. So you're basically giving them it, knowing that it's coming straight back to you. And look, there's a bit of an element of a tactic there to try and draw the opposition out. But if you draw the opposition out, you've got to be good enough to pass through them. And we're not. That's the problem. You know, Starfelt took a lot of grief as being a bit almost clumsy or uncomfortable passing out because he was playing on his wrong side. But even playing on his wrong side, he would find his fullback regularly with his right foot pulling across him. Scales has got his natural side and he still can't find his players. He's starting. Well, I've been on my soapbox about this for a while, and I don't mean to beat up on a player who's obviously been playing above his station, has found himself above his station, but it's clear he's not good enough, and Welsh isn't good enough either. Now they're both perfectly competent defenders at defending their area, blocking, tackling, all of that sort of stuff to some degree, and we'll come on to that a bit in a minute. That's their strengths. But as a Celtic centre-back, you're expected to see a lot of the ball and you're expected to pass the ball forward. And neither of them do either very well. So that just leaves us in. In terms of Taylor, going back to him, you're right. He was inverting. He was showing he's a lot more disciplined. Every Celtic fan would say that we need to strengthen the left-back position, and Greg Taylor probably doesn't fit that for long-term and certainly not at European level. But that's not to say that Greg Taylor isn't a really good footballer. He is. He's just not a great defender and a defensive fullback. And so when we get targeted by better teams, they see that his weakness in a defensive format. But he's a converted midfielder. We've touched on that before. He's very comfortable receiving the ball in midfield. He's got good touch. He links the ball well. He's got a brilliant engine. He makes great runs for the ball and off the ball. And he's good in the offensive third. And he showed that again. But he also knows where he's supposed to be. Even when he's defending, he knows where he's supposed to be. He's just not as good a defender as we would probably like. But I tell you for sure, if he's on the pitch in the 91st or 2nd minute, we do not lose the goal, and therefore we probably don't drop 2 points. Every part of what composure we had appeared to leave the pitch when Greg Taylor walked off it. And that's a damning indictment on the other 10 or 9. I'll give Hart a pass. But that's where we are at the moment. We're bereft of confidence, and we just lack. We lack a killer edge, and the ability to close things out.
I'll give you some stats, Paul, just to back that up. So we're 8 shots to 12. So they had more shots than us. They had 6 on target to our 5. Possession, 71%. That's been standard for the whole Rodgers reign. We've been around the 70% mark pretty much every game. Corner kicks, 8 to 4. Keeper saves, 5 to 4. So, Joe Hart had more to do than the opposition goalkeeper. And you just kind of felt, in the first half, you felt a goal was coming. After about 20 minutes, we had a bit of sustained pressure for about 15, 20 minutes. I went, a goal's coming. And we scored, and I went, I'm not surprised. You could feel like we were creating chances, pressure was building. I went, this is going to come. Equally, as soon as Greg Taylor went off in the second half, I'm sitting here going, Kilmarnock straight to score here, because we were riding our luck way too much. Joe Hart pulls a very good save in the second half. Probably good save in the first half, so great save in the second half. They had a few corners that were flashing left and right. Danny Armstrong had a great chance and totally boxed it up. And I'm thinking on another day, he buries that because he's usually quite dangerous and usually seems to have a really good game against us. And then finally, within the 9 minutes, they scored. And I went, well, that's it. We're not scoring a winner here. We'd used all our subs. We had got progressively weaker with the more substitutes that we made, I feel. And I went, there's no way that if this was Ange Postecoglou's reign, I'm thinking, we can easily go up the park and score. We could probably score 2 goals in that last couple of minutes. But you just felt we're just punching, like we're trying to punch out a wet bag at the moment. We just can't seem to do it. Like you say, lack of a killer edge. But you've got to go back to the St. Mirren game. That's the turn of the year where we won 3-0. But ever since then, we have struggled to score 2 goals in a game. And apart from one game, if we haven't scored more than 1 goal, we've dropped points. So, we're basically giving up a goal a game, more or less. So that means we have to score 2. But that just seems to be a challenge for us at the moment. We're creating some chances. I wouldn't say we're creating an absolute bucket load of chances and we're being completely, I don't know if the word is flagrant or whatever, but we're not creating enough. But then we're not taking the chances that are there either. And particularly at key moments in games, if we score early in the second half, then it's easy. It's easy street after that because they've got to score 2. They didn't really look in it, but they just grew in confidence. A bit like when we played them at Rugby Park. And our stats against Kilmarnock this season is 1 win at home, last time we played them in the league, 2 defeats, both at Rugby Park, so the Cup game, the League Cup game, and then the league, and now a draw at Celtic Park. So they're quickly becoming our bogey team. And it's not like Derek McInnes is mastermind of football because Rodgers had him on a leash the last time he was in Scotland. Ange Postecoglou wiped the floor with Derek McInnes every chance he got as well. So it's not all of a sudden that Derek's become a tactical mastermind, but he seems to put a man on McGregor, man marks McGregor. So that takes that easy ball for the centre halves out. And all of a sudden, because we lack that bit of quality, as you just said, Paul, we don't know what to do. We don't have a plan B. We don't have another option. And for me, all right, the players maybe should be able to figure that out on the park. But if I, layman on the sidelines, can sit here and watch it and say, well, that's what's going on, why are we not making some sort of tactical change to try and nullify that? Why are we not maybe just going long for a bit or just do something different just to change it up so it forces Kilmarnock to change their tactics? But we seem to play right into their hands. And as the game went on, we lacked that intensity that they seemed to find as the longer the game went, which for me is the most frustrating thing about this whole thing. You've got a Rangers team at the other side of Glasgow who are just a bunch of journeymen who are just, again, they're grinding results as well. Admittedly, they got the helping hand of 2 penalties late in the game yesterday from VAR, but they're just doing what they need to do. We just can't seem capable of doing what needs to be done. All right, we're 1-0 with 10 minutes to go. All right, it's not ideal, it's not great, but there should be enough nous in that team, even with the players missing, younger players coming in, to say, all right, let's put our foot in the ball here and let's keep the ball. We don't have to play 100 miles an hour. Let's maintain some possession, take the sting out of the game and see it out. But we couldn't do that. And for me, and I'm going to throw you back to a minute, Paul, because I've been talking for a while. The minute I knew we were done was when Callum McGregor got the ball and kicked it pretty much straight up in the air. And I went, if that's your best footballer on the park, losing composure like that, that says to me that the teammates around him aren't giving him the information. And if he's panicked, then God knows what the rest of the team's like. And that is just like, that's a damning indictment of this team at the moment. At home, 1-0 up, the crowd behind you, well, until their goal went in. I can't put my finger on it. I mean, like you say, Brendan Rodgers meant to be this elite manager, but where's the direction? Because after the game, he says, oh, we lacked authority. We didn't see it out. This is not the first time I've said it. Well, why is it continually a problem? And then Callum McGregor said in a post-match a day after the game that, I had to tell certain players what it means to be playing for Celtic. It's like, well, why are you having that conversation now? Because those players, the new players, or the one or two that came in, Ida and Kuhn, came in January. We're now halfway through February. And the other players, they've been here 6 months. So why are you having to have this conversation now when we're in a title race and we've pushed away the leads in the title race? Why now? Why, that for me is just very, very frustrating. And, I've said my piece. Paul, just you have your...
Wait, just it plays to the comms coming out of the club is just, they're not like, they're just unclear and muddled and just generally nonsense. Like, I could barely believe Rodgers' post-match interview where he almost conducted it like he was at arm's length from the debacle that's been going on for the last, most of the season, to be honest, on and off, but certainly the last few weeks. He said, this is happening and that's happening, like it's happening, like without his say so, without his. At the end of the day, we could all moan about bigger picture, ownership, board, recruitment, funding. I've said it before and I'll say it again, I'm almost sick speaking about that stuff because we all know that. And that's not to say it's a fact. That's one of the main reasons we're in a title fight, because we made such a pig's ear of that when we should have been pressing home an advantage. But we all know that, and it's a different. Let's just park that for now. I've been saying consistently we've got a good enough squad to win this title, and we should have a good enough manager based on track record. But Rodgers isn't showing that he's not doing the in-game management, to your point, when things are going awry and changing things significantly to move it forward. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We're starting well, and then we go in at halftime when presumably he gives us some words of wisdom, and we come out and we tend to play worse in the second half, which I can barely believe. And it's a recurring theme. We've barely strung two halves of football together all season. Sometimes it's the first half that's dreadful and the second half picks up, but more often than not, it's been first half's decent, second half's a debacle. In fact, while I've got that, I think I've got this handy here. Brilliant tweet from the Cynic, 90 Minutes Cynic, another good podcast I'm sure you guys are aware of. Put a tweet out that said, "Can't remember when Celtic games have been so predictable and we've been there for the taking so often." And then a numbered list. 1, Celtic with all the ball. 2, Celtic score. 3, chances are missed. 4, half time. 5, possession but no penetration. 6, opposition believe. 7, Celtic crumble. 8, equalizer. Rinse and repeat. They're absolutely spot on. Like, that's what we've seen consistently. And sometimes we get out of jail and sometimes we don't. And more often than not, we've not been getting out of jail. I actually thought, I agree with you. As soon as Taylor went off, the writing was on the wall that certainly chances were growing. We'd lost composure. The Kilmarnock thing was just incredible. You're looking for him to bring some composure, and he brings, he goes the other way, bizarrely. Obviously, Bernabei is utter chaos and delivers that again. But I did think, Hart's good save, other bits and pieces. I was starting to, foolishly starting to think we might just close this out. And if Rodgers was right about anything, it was that he kind of thought that might be the case as well, and we wouldn't have deserved it. It was a terrible performance, but we might have got away with a good result. But as it stood, that was wishful thinking as well. And we got. I say, let's be blunt. By the end, and this is, it is by the end, because by halftime again, I think the game should have been pretty much put to bed by halftime. And we'll come into a little bit more detail on actual sort of opportunities, chances, and the goals in a minute. But once that's been passed up in that last 25 minutes, they probably feel a little bit gutted that they didn't win the game, because they created the better chances, they tested us more, and we were all over the place. We were absolutely at sea.
After they scored, they had the last best chance of the game. Drew Hart had to pull another save. It was a shot. I mean, admittedly, it was one you'd expect him to save, but that goes in. you know, just
Yeah, he
that would
doesn't.
have been
Yeah, he
like,
doesn't make a good contact, and it's a pretty straightforward save. It would have been a bit of a Hollywood if he scored from there. But you're right, there was another chance, and it wasn't at the end you would have thought
wasn't
it would
us.
be. No.
Paul, the let's talk about the goal, because we might as well have some cheer
Enjoyment.
or some enjoyment out of this, because we do this as a volunteer thing. We don't get paid, as I think you'd like to think we do get paid for this. That'd be terrible. So the goal, well worked move. Greg Taylor involved. Talk us through it. What did you think?
Yeah, so I think there's a little inverted run by Taylor. It's turned around the corner. I'm not sure who plays it around the corner. It might be Cal. Anyway, he picks up the ball on the turn and gets it out. So he's in that sort of half space in the final third. He plays it out to Palmer, who cuts in, as pretty much he always does. He's shaping to shoot, but he's getting gradually closed down. And we're narrow again, and we're busy around the edge of the box. There's a lot of players in there, and there's a lot of defenders in there. And he sort of gets out of the way and lets it fall to Matt O'Reilly. O'Reilly kind of plays a little 1-2 with Maeda, I think, inside the box, but there's no go forward. So it's just O'Reilly just lays it off to Ralston, who's lurking on the corner of the 18-yard box in the right wing position. Meanwhile, Kyogo's peeled off his marker towards the corner of the 6-yard box, and Ralston, give him his credit, he picks him out an absolute peach, and I think on our group chat it was said that he's potentially currently the best crosser at the club, and I can't disagree with that, to be honest. He's always had good delivery, but we've also had better quality attackers and wide players who you would say, well, they're still better crossers of the ball. But we've got wingers who've got no desire to get to a byline and cross a ball in. So I don't disagree that he probably is the best crosser of the ball at the club at the minute. Anyway, he puts in a great ball, and Kyogo's drifted, and he gets off his man. He gives himself his space, and he directs a brilliant header back across goal over the keeper and into the far corner of the net. And it's a really good finish. It's kind of back to kind of what you would expect from Kyogo. The movement's good. He stays on side, loses his defender, and he plants it in the far corner. And it's a great goal. And as you said earlier, it's kind of nothing less than we deserve at that point. We've created a few half chances up until that point, and we've played at a decent tempo. We've linked the play well. We've caused them some problems. And that was pretty much just desserts about half an hour in.
The other chances I remember was the one where Palmer should have probably shot with his left foot straight away, but he tries to cut in again, runs out of space.
Yeah.
And then the other one was Matt O'Reilly with a double chance. So the one, the ball bounces up and he sort of shoots and hits it down off the ground. Keeper pulls a save. Then the follow-up header gets cleared off the line by the defender on the post.
Yeah. So I think the Palmer chance is really good play by both McGregor and Ida. So Ida drops deep, and McGregor shows some go forward, running forward with the ball, passes it in. Ida just does a lovely little back heel flick into his path, completely takes the defender out. Cal pushes on again and slips in Palmer. And you're right, it's the best opportunity is the first time he receives the ball, because after that, space starts to close in. He's got 2 or 3 guys in the box. On the Celtic TV commentary, I think Jerry McCulloch was sort of suggesting, and John Hartson was suggesting that he should have been looking to play that in. But the 2 or 3 players that were in the box were well marshaled, and you'd have been, you could smash it across goal and it might hit a defender and go in, or one of our players might have got the first touch. But you were into you'd be into a bit of a pinball lottery at that point. I think you're right. He should have pulled the trigger on his left foot. The angle was narrowing, but it was only getting worse. And as soon as he cut in, he gave everyone, same as when our centre backs take too many touches, everybody gets back, covers, gets himself set, and he gets squeezed out. And then the Matt O'Reilly chance actually comes from another bit of Palmer play. He comes in and again cuts in, takes a speculative shot. It deflects through to O'Reilly. His first touch is really good, and gets it gets it pretty much under control. It's maybe bouncing a little high, but again, that's a chance for me that Matt O'Reilly should tuck away. He gives the key. It's a good. His shot is decent, but it's a good height for the keeper, and it's not in the corner. It then bobbles back up, and he does well to get the header on goal. But by that point, obviously, there's a defender back covering on the line, and it would have been a bit of a fluff by them if that header had ended up in the goal. But the good chance there is the half volley, and similarly to a few times of late, and maybe you can add in his miss against St Mirren, which ultimately, thankfully, Maeda tucked away. He's just not been as sharp in the second half of the season with his finishing than he was in the first half. He has a good chance second half as well, and again he gets it on goal, but a good height and not in the corner, and the keeper makes a half decent save. But I feel like both of those chances he should be tucking them away, and that might seem a bit harsh. Other people might say they're only half chances, but with his ability on his good side, we've seen him score a lot tougher chances than that, and I'd be expecting him to think of the goal he scored against Hearts when it coming over his shoulder. That skill's incredible, and he manages to hit that. He scored that screamer from outside the box. I think it was against St Johnstone on his right foot. So Matt O'Reilly, absolutely on fire, is scoring both of those, I think, and he's missed both. And then Bernardo misses a brilliant chance.
That was the one I remember in the second half. Yep.
Yeah, and look, again, that's not really crafted. It's a bit of a shambles. Kuhn comes in cuts in again, another winger cutting in, and then tries to lay in O'Reilly. He sort of trips over it. It sort of breaks. And we've seen it before from Bernardo, really composed, doesn't rush the first, doesn't rush to smash it straight away. He gets it out of his feet. He makes space for himself. But then he doesn't have the composure to find the target, and he hits it just over the bar. We only made 5 or 6 chances. We scored 1. There's 3 there that we should score in my book. You score any one of those, we win the game. That's to your earlier point. So we need to score 2 goals to win games. And if we score, and again, we said this before, if you get 2-0 up, you take the wind out of their sails, chances it's more likely you'll score a third than they'll score 1.
Well, what they tend to do sometimes is they look to next week's game and say, oh, well, this game's a bust. Let's take some players off and put some other players on, not with the intention of trying to win the game, but the intention of just try to damage limitation. They just accepted the game's over. But at the moment, we're just, the fear factor against Celtic and even at Celtic Park is just gone. And this is what Chris Sutton was saying. And he's just sort of saying, where's the... teams are coming and they're having a go at us because they think they can get something. There's another really good point that he made. There's another really good point that he made as well, which is just escaping me right at this moment in time. But there was another point he made that was very pertinent as well. But
I'm sure.
But yeah, it's just like I said, it's frustrating. But like you say, enough chances there again. And how many times have we said that this year or this season?
Every game,
enough chances
game
to win the
much.
game. Enough chances to win every game, a game of 2 halves.
Yeah, so I like to come on here every week and sound like a bastard and broken record. Do you know what I mean? Like it's the same story.
But it's the performance. That's the performance. That's what we're watching.
It is. And it's starting to get pretty. Like I'm a kind of, me, I'm a glass half full kind of guy, but I'm starting to get pretty fed up of. Like you say, we can all see what's going on, and we're not getting a reaction from the manager. We're not getting a reaction from the players. Like we're right in it now. Like this is the first time we've dropped to second place. Yeah. We'll likely. I don't expect to get a favour from Hearts next weekend, so we'll be likely 5 points behind, and then we've got to go to Motherwell on a midday kickoff on a Sunday. That game is enormous, and I've really got zero confidence, to be honest, at the minute. Like Motherwell are so hit and miss. Like you'd expect, but they'll be up for it. Like as you say, every team basically every team thinks if we can get to 60, 70 minutes and we're in it. And I don't mean like already tied, but even if they're only 1-0 down, even if you're 2-0 down against Celtic at the moment with 60 minutes to go, you would fancy your chances of getting at least a point. That's how bad things have got. And that's incredible. Like, usually, as I said earlier, if you're 2-0 up, if you're Celtic and you're 2-0 up against anyone, the expectation is it's 3-0 rather than 2-1. That's what's coming next. But that's where we're at the minute. I just can't. I just cannot believe how weak mentally we are.
Let's talk about the goal that we conceded, because that's the other main key talking point from this game. So let's do this before we start running out of time. We're at 35 minutes at the moment.
Let's do
that. So basically, we got the park. It breaks. I track both wingers not really putting any pressure. So Nicholas Kroon's just jogging back. He just basically doesn't even track or trace or do anything. You've got Yang on the other wing applying light to moderate pressure, but again, not enough in my book to really defend from the front. So Killie get out. And then somehow our right back position or their left wing position, guys got acres of space. So you're thinking, well, Kroon should be tracking that. Ralston probably should have been a little bit closer. Ralston doesn't really close down with enough intensity in my mind. He sort of stops halfway. Like, he really could have really tried to a bit more pressure there. Ball comes over. Could one of the centre halves done better? Probably. Flies over their heads. And then you've got Bernabei out of position, claiming he was pushed when there was, and they did a VAR check, but there was like virtually no contact whatsoever, weak as water. And the guy's basically got a free header at the back stick, and it's one each. And I'm a stone. Well, again, could you see that coming? Yes, I could. Bernabei's obviously culprit number one, which is his man. His marking was terrible. He was out of position. He was weak. But, you can count 3 or 4 things that happened before that. If somebody had stepped up and applied a bit more pressure, maybe it doesn't get there in the first place. But ultimately, Bernabei's left holding the baby. But, again, a better defender. Greg Taylor wouldn't let that go in. He'd either draw the foul properly, so he'd actually back into him and make it look like an actual foul, or at the very least put enough pressure on the guy so that he can't get a free header, which is really all you're asking your short fullbacks to do, is apply enough pressure. And if he still scores, then when you say, well, all right, that's a really good finish, but when it's a free header, it's inexcusable, particularly when you're 4 at the back. So for me, there's a bit of culpability going around. Our forward press was average. Too many players jogging back, just expecting other players to deal with it. And I think that's where Callum McGregor obviously flew off the handle, because apparently he refused to do any media duties after the game because he was in the change rooms tearing strips off everybody, which is all right. It's good that your captain's doing that. And as I said before, maybe this should have happened a few weeks ago, because it's not like this is the first time it's happened. But there's just an overall lack of intensity there. And that, for me, is, if you're not going to put the effort in and at least close the ball down, then what are you doing on the park? Why are you getting picked in the first place? And for me, right, we all wrote James Forrest off. We said, Forrest, he's done, he's finished, whatever. But I think I'd rather have James Forrest on the park coming on in a wing position with 10, 15 minutes to go, because at least he got the nous to be able to hold the ball up and show a bit of composure, where our wingers at the moment just run into players or just give the ball away or get caught in two minds and don't know what to do. And then the ball just breaks. And then that just adds to the fear and the danger that we're going to concede a goal. Sorry, I went on a bit of a tangent there, but what's your thoughts on that?
Well, you're right that Bernabei is a shambles, and probably in the final boiling down of it should take the bulk, or certainly the majority of the blame. But as is anything, look, the worst thing is he's well inside his man. He's given his man a good 2-3 yards of space behind him. Any fullback, it's like a wee while since I played fullback, but any fullback knows you should be goal side of the danger man, and he's not. And if anything, you want to be, either behind or in line with him, so that you've got the run on him and you can see where the danger's coming from. He's got no idea where his man is. His man's behind him, a couple of yards, and he's not the tallest anyway, so he's completely cut out by the cross. And then, to add insult to injury, he tries to sort of manufacture a weak foul, and slightly dismissed by VAR. But as anything, as you kind of alluded to, you defend as a unit. That to me, there's two other major culprits in this, and you touched on Ralston. And yes, his closing down wasn't good enough, but there's a bigger issue here that way before the ball is in the final phases, it's punted from their fullback position into the middle of the park aimlessly. And Tony Ralston's got a chance to take it down on his chest and drive forward into space. And he just bangs a header back into the middle of no man's land and gives the ball back. So that lack of composure of just sort of, I don't mind you fucking throwing a header in it if it's you're defending your 18-yard box, but it's on the halfway line, near enough. And he doesn't have the composure to chest it down or try and get the ball, and then they're actually a bit stretched at that point. He just loops a header back and gifts possession back. And then you're right, later on, he's too busy panicking about getting his arms behind his back and avoiding a handball than he is about actually getting pressure on the winger, which is not like Ralston. Ralston is usually, right up for the intensity part of the match. But, he's only back a little bit. Maybe he's starting to feel it a little bit by that late in the game. But he's definitely given him too much space and allows him to get a good delivery in. The other major culprit in this is before it gets to the winger that plays the final ball in, it's punted into our box. And the guy who knocks the ball onto the winger, the Kilmarnock guy who heads the ball onto the wide position, the winger collects it, is the defender right, who is pretty much lame by this point.
Oh,
he's
yeah,
pulled up
right.
injured.
Yes.
He's pulled up injured in his box.
They've used all
their subs, so they get him up the pitch just to be a nuisance. And he beats Stephen Welsh to header when he's on one leg. Now, that's a scandal. That is an absolute scandal. And Welsh should hang his head in shame for that. To get beaten to a header by a centre-back in your box who's only on one leg, and ultimately that leads to the equalising goal. It's just not good enough. It's just an absolute shambles. But so there you go. Only Scales escapes from this one with any kind of pass, because there's nothing he can do to influence it. But Ralston's made a pig's ear of it. Welsh has made a pig's ear of it. Burnaby's had a shambles as well. It's just one of the worst goals you'll see in multiple phases of play in terms of defending. And you're right, as a collective unit, there isn't enough intensity. Players aren't willing to press the ball. And then Nicholas Kuhn and Yang, they're guys who, played less than a half. Kuhn's only played 20 minutes. Yang's played at half. These are young guys just at a big club trying to make a name for themselves. The absolute minimum requirement to play for Celtic is effort. Now, if you put in 100% effort in a Celtic shirt and you're not up to scratch, most Celtic fans will go, well, at least he's trying. And the blame will fall at the recruitment team and the manager for selecting players that aren't good enough. But if you are not putting 100% effort, the blame starts to come on you, and it'll come on pretty quickly. So yeah, there's too much of that. And I agree with you, Gerard. But why are these players only being told now? Now, I don't believe Adamida needs to be told, so it's not him. He's grown up a Celtic fan. He will know 100% what it means, and I feel like his efforts, not in question. Whether he's a good enough player to be, holding down that front spot is another question. He had an okay game, and he showed a few nice touches, but decision making not ideal, and we didn't get good enough service into him quick enough. But I don't believe it's for him. So then the only other new player, like you say, is Kuhn. And I could believe he potentially needs to understand where he's come to. I can't believe we gave him a 5.5-year contract as well, by the way. Now, I'm not going to judge him just yet. It's early days.
Admit, I was thinking that myself. I'm going like 5 years of this, potentially. Or, he becomes the next Mikey Johnson and gets loaned out and scores a goal in his debut, but whatever. Let's
hope he comes onto a game. But yeah, my concern now is that there's so much wrong. There seems to be a general malaise across the squad and the manager. I hadn't read that about McGregor tearing strips off of players in the dressing room afterwards. So that is, why has it not happened sooner? But at least it's happening. You'd like to think that there's a lot of strong messages coming through that training sessions this week. We've got, there's a full week to get things sorted. Hopefully, I don't know if we'll have anyone else back. Maybe Alistair Johnson could be back for this weekend. It's probably another week. I know CCV's training.
Maybe.
I'd be loath to start him. If
is it one of these injuries though that just flares and you just try? If he feels good, you play him. If he doesn't feel good, you don't play him. I mean, what do you do?
Well, potentially. I think our season is now defined on, can he get a reasonable number of minutes under his belt between now and the end of the season? And when Hatate comes back, does he stay fit?
That's where we're landing. We need to be in a situation where it still matters by the time Hatate gets back. And how damning is it that we're basically hoping a prayer on a guy that's hardly kicked the ball all season? So let's face it.
Two guys that have hardly kicked the ball all season. CCV's not played a lot of football either. That's where we are.
We're asking a lot. I know. But we need a spark. We need something. And I thought maybe last week that was the two up top was the spark, but it was all right for 45 minutes. Then let's say back to square one again. But I definitely feel at the moment when we make substitutions, it's not making us better. We lose cohesion. I don't know. There's just not enough instruction. There's just not enough to us. And you start questioning, is our squad strong enough? But our wingers, we just seem to have much of a muchness. Like you really, Maeda and Palmer are basically getting starts by default because there's absolutely no pressure on them from any other quarter at the moment. And obviously with Abada being in his situation, he's obviously trying to orchestrate a move away, and a lot of that will be outside pressure. It won't necessarily be coming from the player himself. You're down one of your goal scoring assets from last season. So it's effectively another player away, unavailable, injured, whatever you want to call it, but he's not available.
Yeah.
So, you have a certain amount of sympathy for the management, but, and this was the other point that Chris Sutton made, and it's just come to me now, is that who has Brendan Rodgers made better this season? Which players have improved under Brendan?
Well, and you say Matt O'Reilly only is the only one you can point.
Well, you say Matt O'Reilly in the first half of the season, but I'd say he's regressed. I'd say since the transfer window, he's playing at a good 20% below what he was doing in the first half.
I think him and Kilmarnock have been flogged. That's the problem. Because there's no depth, and we're missing Hatate, Moy's gone. Yeah. We're not willing to. There's been injuries, but we don't trust. We don't trust Home. We don't trust Iwata.
And you made that point, is that why didn't he come on? Well, surely he's your guy when you want to steady the ship and you want to have another defender in there who's ready to break up play. He's a strong laddie. Why is he not getting a look in? I'm not damning Bernardo. I thought he was all right. I didn't think
Bernardo did okay. And I actually think Bernardo was unlucky when he lost his place the other week in the St Mirren game. I'm sure he wasn't dropped when he was rotated. Because he was the best midfielder against Hibs. He was better than both O'Reilly and Cal. So he could feel pretty aggrieved that he was the one that was left out when they moved to 4-4-1-1, 4-4-2, whichever you want to call it. He's had some good games. He's not the finished article. I see a lot of people turning on him again. We saw quick to write him off, quick to say pay the money, and now a couple average games, and it's like, can't pay 6 million for him. You absolutely can pay 6 million for him because he's better than most of what we've got, and that's the going rate. The reason why we've got under par players is because we're only willing to spend 2 and 3 million on most of them. So you get what you pay for, and 6 million 20 years ago got you a Hartson or a Chris Sutton.
Doesn't know.
6 million gets you a rough diamond from Benfica's academy, and so be it. That's where we are.
And the other thing to finally answer that question with Chris Sutton is the only other player that's improved is Liam Stiles, but not enough to. Yeah. Anyway, we're not going to go back onto that, but he has improved in terms of what we saw the last time he was in Celtic shirt or preseason or whatever. So I mean, but
that's true.
What's that?
But is he better than when he was at Aberdeen though?
I didn't watch enough of him at Aberdeen to make comment on that.
Neither did I. It's a rhetorical question, but I guess the thing is, we don't know if he's improved under Rodgers or whether he's got to this level while he was at Aberdeen and he's just continued that level of form. And it's just he's getting game time, and you naturally with games are going to be a bit better, a bit sharper. So I'm not hugely convinced that there's a lot to hang his hat on there.
I think I've said all I want to say about this game, Paul. To be honest, I'm drawing a line under it. I think we've vented. I think I'm feeling a wee bit better now that I've got off my chest. I really wasn't in the mood to come on tonight, but I'm feeling better now that we've had a chat for nearly an hour. Man of the match, Paul, this week. Any takers?
Well, it's only really one candidate. It was two candidates. So
does one of them wear a pair of gloves by any chance?
Well, yeah, he does. But first, like, honourable mention to Greg Taylor. To your point, if he'd stayed on the pitch, I think we win the game. So great to have him back. And let's hope he can play 90 minutes for the rest of the season. Every match, and we might win something. But yeah, you're spot on for the third week in a row. Joe Hart's my man in the match.
Yep, I agree. And I just don't want to see Alexandre Bernabé anywhere near that team for the rest of the season. I'd play, I would say if Atati was available, I'd play him at left back. I'd play anybody at left back.
Like Kyogo at left back before
I played Maeda at left back. Honestly,
that's a realistic suggestion. But honestly, I'd play Kyogo. I'd play Nicholas Kuhn. I'd play pretty much anyone at left back.
I could think of about 4 or 5 players I could play in that position before I play him again. So
I just play Ralston. Right? When Johnson gets back, you'd play Ralston before you'd play him again.
Yeah. Anyway, I've said my piece, but I'm willing to write him off. He's just a lost cause, and he's just an absolute shambles of a player. And whoever stouted him needs their head firmly examined.
Oh, have you got any news?
Well,
that would do too.
I was looking for a PC, non-sweary way. But good. Right, that was what I was thinking. Paul, music recommendations for this week. What you got?
Music recommendation of the week. Now, this was decided upon long before the weekend's results, but it's quite funny that the album title ties in a bit with how things are going at the moment. But so my music recommendation.
Is D-Ream releasing Things Can Only Get Better? Or is it 25th year?
No. So my recommendation is an up-and-coming Aussie band called Middle Kids. Middle Kids have released their second full-length album this week, or the back end of last week. We're now on Monday. So yeah, last week it was probably Monday or Tuesday it came out last week. It's called Faith Crisis Part 1. So yeah, there might be a faith crisis going on. This is part 1. God knows what
part 2.
But yeah, so Middle Kids, Faith Crisis Part 1, second album. If you're, obviously we're an Aussie show. I'm sure we pick up viewers and listeners from all over. But if you haven't heard of Middle Kids, give them a shout. If you are in Australia, the tour tickets went on sale last week, and there will still be a few tickets at some venues around Australia. I've got mine for Perth. Looking forward to that in May. But yeah, check out Middle Kids. Faith Crisis Part 1 is album of the week.
Bit of a guilty pleasure of mine. They released a new episode this week, the Grand Tour, Clarkson, May and Hammond. The Sand Job. So they're doing a mini Dakar rally through the Sahara Desert in Mauritania. So I started watching that last night and then got about 40 minutes in and I was absolutely knackered and had to turn off and go to bed. So the second half of that to watch. But yes, if you like the lads, it's the usual banter, if that is your bag. That's it for this week, guys. Please.
Before we go, I've got a little TV recommendation as well.
Okay, cool. I'll let you have it. There you go.
There's a show called Blue Lights, which I think is a BBC show. It's set in Northern Ireland.
Before.
It's brilliant. Oh, good. So yeah, I've got into that. It's on SBS in Australia. I think it's a BBC show originally. Quite far through that. So
have you seen the bit where they do the karaoke in the car yet? And he goes, "Oh, what song do you want to put on?" And he's like, "Oh," she's like, "Oh, I'll put on Roller Coaster with Ronan Keating," and he just goes, "Oh, I can't do that." and then they start singing in the car. Oh, you haven't seen that yet.
I don't know. I'm
very
about
poignant.
4 episodes in, but yeah, maybe
I
not.
think it
maybe.
might be the. I think it might be the 5th episode. So
Yeah,
yeah.
so it'll be
Anyway,
coming up next.
Yeah, we're
So
coming
yeah,
up. But
it's a really good show, a good
it's
cast
really
as well. So yeah, set in Northern Ireland.
in
Police
Belfast. It just has
Department,
you on the
yeah.
edge of your seat. It's really like you just don't know what's going to happen. And trust
Good
me, you don't know
cast.
what's going to happen.
No, I do. Yeah, I do. One other. While I've got it, I'm watching One Day on Netflix as well, which is the David
I was told
Nichols
about
book.
this.
Yeah, I was a bit skeptical because I never watched the movie because the book was so good, but I've heard a lot of good things floating around social media on the TV adaptation. Because it's set in the late 80s, right through the 90s into the early 2000s. They've got a brilliant soundtrack, and they've done a really good job getting the bands on it. And yeah, only a few episodes in, but the cast is decent as well. So yeah.
How do you find the time, Paul Massey, for all this entertainment news? Like you,
that's my downtime. And when it's as hot as it's been,
yes,
you don't leave the house much. You sit in the aircon and yeah. Chill out.
Unless you're standing in front of a pizza oven like an absolute idiot.
Yep.
Guys, last week I forgot to say to everybody to like the video. So our views were down. So if you can like the video, that again, like I said, allows like-minded Celts to see us online. And like I said, if you've got any thoughts on what Paul or I have just said for the last hour, please leave a comment because I'll always read them. I'll always do them what we like. So with that in mind, there's not much else to say, but hail.
Hail.